Hi, this is Mike Ricker with Florstar, and we're going to demonstrate how to make a board replacement on a floating floor. This is a from the forest product. It's a 1/2 inch thick, and it's been floated using tongue and groove adhesive. So we are going to remove a board and replace it. To do that, you're going to need a circular saw, a tapping block, a chisel, and a screwdriver, some long mask blue tape, and some tongue and groove adhesive. That should be all you need. There shouldn't be a router required or any additional accessories or splines. It should be pretty simple. The most important thing you're going to need, though, is a piece of product that is acclimated the same as the floor. So if you're making a board replacement, don't take a piece of flooring that day out of the attic or out of the car or the basement of the garage. It's not going to be the same dimensional size because of the humidity. So make sure you put the flooring that you're going to replace, the replacement boards, in the same room for at least 3 days before the board replacement. That way you should have a lot of success. So the first thing we're going to do is identify the board we're going to replace. We're going to replace this long one right here in the middle of the demo. And to start with, I'm going to take some long mask blue tape and I'm going to mask off the board. Once the sawdust starts flying, it can be very easy to saw a little too far, damage the next board, and before you know it, your 1 board replacement is going to a 3 or 4 board replacement. So I'm going to take the blue tape, and it's important to use long mask by 3M. It will not harm the finish on any of these floors. If you use regular masking tape, it can actually damage the finish on the adjacent boards, and then you have a bigger job on your hands. So I'm going to put this tape right along the edge of the board I'm replacing. I'm going to outline the entire board. Doesn't have to be perfect. And this again is the Vineyard Collection by From the Forest. It's a beautiful product, beautiful appearance as you can see, and very easy to work with. So once I have my board clearly identified, the next job is to remove the damaged plank. To do that, you take your circular saw and you want to set it to just cut a little bit deeper than the flooring itself. So as you can see, as it sits on the flooring, it's barely scraping the floor below. I want to make sure I cut clean through it, otherwise it's going to be difficult to remove, but I don't want to cut too far through it to go into much through the plastic. So what we're going to do, I'll draw it out here so you can see easier. We're going to cut 2 long cuts parallel to the sides. Then we're going to cut into each corner, staying about 1/4 of an inch from the corner because you don't want to damage the adjacent boards. We'll clean it up afterwards with a chisel so we get a little bit closer. So we're just going to cut about 1/4 inch into the corners. So we're going to do that next, and then we'll show you what's next. Always wear safety glasses to make sure nobody gets injured. Now I'm going to cut into the corners. going to make 2 final cuts across the center board just so I can remove it easier. So I'm just going to cut towards the ends. Okay, now we're going to take a second. I'll just sweep this up with a vacuum and we'll be right back. Okay, we've made all of our cuts. The next thing I'm going to do is take a screwdriver and pry the center section out. If I've cut deep enough, it should come out relatively easily. Which it has. So we cut just perfectly. So I'll set that aside. Next, I'm going to take a chisel and a mallet. I'm going to just try to score from the cuts that I made, because the circular saw blade is obviously deeper here than it is towards the cuts. I'm going to try to cut clear through down the end over here. Okay. Now I'm going to remove the remaining boards. It's important during this step that you take a piece of material or a square-edged piece of wood and set it right up along the edge. If you try to pull back without something to hold it down, you could damage the adjacent board. So I'm going to work this up slowly and put some weight on it here.
It's going.
Okay. So now that we have our corners chiseled and we're pulling back, you'll hear it release when the glue snaps. Then you can just pull it free. And your tongue should still be on the tongue side. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other 3 sides. Simply pry back until you hear it, the glue break, and then you can pull it free. So we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so I got the final one here. You pull it up till it wiggles free and remove it. Now my hole is empty. Now the next key to a successful board replacement is to clean all the residue off of the tongue and along the edge. If you have a paint scraper, it makes it much easier to drag along. You can use a chisel just to drag along the edge and remove any of the fibers left from the other plank. So I'll take a few minutes. This is where you want to spend your time to make sure it's done right. And I'll remove all the leftover pieces from the old piece, and then we'll continue. You have this almost cleaned up, and again, this is where you want to spend your time in preparation. So I've dragged my chisel around it, not to damage the next board, but just to make sure all the glue is freed up. And I spent a lot of time in the corners, because you want to make sure all the wood fiber has been removed from the old plank in the corner. If not, the new one will never fit properly. So once I have everything cleaned up, I can remove the tape, back it out real good, and then we'll prepare our next piece. Now, as you can see, the plastic is still in good shape. If you did cut through it and you need to put a new piece in there, or you need to put some duct tape on that one to hold it in place, that's perfectly acceptable. So take off the tape, take one more look to make sure there's no sawdust on here. Here's a piece of wood fiber here to remove. Okay, the next step is to prepare the replacement board. What I'm going to do with the replacement board is I'm going to take my circular saw and set it just to remove the bottom of the groove. So on the side and on the end, I'm going to remove this bottom lip. So I will cut right along here. And then I will leave the tongue in place. And from the groove side, I'll measure over and cut it to length, removing the tongue as well. So that's the next step. And for the sake of time, we'll take a break here while I cut it out. We'll be right back. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. As you can see, I've removed the bottom of the groove from the short side and from the long side. Next, using a miter box, cut off the tongue side to the length you need, perfectly straight. So I'll be right back with that. We have this board prepared. One thing to keep in mind on a beveled edge product, if this board happens to be the right length, if you had one that you had to cut and it's beveled, take a piece of sandpaper, lightly rub the sharp edge to create a small bevel, and then stain it with some of the filler that you get to use on the floor, or just some stain from the hardware just to cover that little bitty edge. Then once you have it all done, check one last time. The groove has to be cleared out here to make sure that the tongue will fit properly. Make sure you've cleaned it up with a chisel really well, or a paint scraper, gently across this edge to make sure it's all ready to roll. Now I'm going to dry fit it first. If you're doing one in the field, make sure you go to a glass shop and get a suction cup. Because once this is in place, it's going to be tough to pry out. You can grab it with a suction cup to pull it out after the dry fit. Since I'm using a mock-up here, I can always lift it up and poke my finger through the bottom of the floor, but you don't have that luxury. So make sure you get a suction cup or two to pull out after you dry fit it. So I'm going to put it in, make sure it fits smoothly. If it's high on one edge, then I just have to come back with my scraper or chisel and scrape it down a little more to make it nice and flat across the top. Once it fits perfectly, I'm going to take TNG adhesive and put it on the top of the tongue, here, here, and here. That'll hold that board in place permanently. But we're not going to use glue yet, we're going to dry fit. So we put the tongue into the groove, very gently, take a tapping block. Now you don't want to bang it with the block because you'll damage it. Always hit a tapping block with a mallet. So I'm going to gently tap this as we go down until it fits in place, and then this here should push down gently, just like that. Now what I will do is I'll pull this board out, put glue around it, weight this down while the glue sets for about an hour, and the homeowner will never know which board was replaced. The ideal thing is to put the tape around another flooring board somewhere else on the floor so they think you did a really stellar job. But it's as easy as that to replace a floating floor plank. It makes it a lot easier also after you dry fit it to have a good suction cup. You can get these at glass supply stores or hardwares. So you suction it down, then you can lift that plank right out once you're sure that it fits. If you put it in without a suction cup and it's still a little high, it's very difficult to pry it out without damaging the board. So if it were high, I can come back in here where it was a little high and clean up a little bit more. But mine fit really well. So the final step is to put glue on it. And I like to put glue on top of the tongue here, here, and here. Have a damp paper towel too, so when the glue squirts out a little bit, you can just wipe it up. So now that I know it fits, I'll put it back in position, take my tapping block with the mallet rather than hitting it directly with the tapping block, tap it into place, and then press it down. Now I will keep it even and I will put something heavy on it, like I said, for about 2 hours or an hour, while the glue sets on this edge here to hold it down flat. You can see the board is perfectly flush. The end joint where the square cut is looks perfect, and nobody will ever know that there was a board replaced in this floor. The integrity of the floor is still intact. You still have a unified floating system. Thank you very much for your business.